Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni viewer, and I don't normally make videos like this, but I have to right now, cause I had brought to my attention quite possibly the dumbest article about Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019 that I have yet to come across. Posted on entertainmentweekly.com, or EW.com for short, but it's Entertainment Weekly's main site. It's an article by Daniel Menegaz called Why Crawl is a Better Reptile Monster Movie Than Godzilla King of the Monsters. Now, full disclosure, I have not seen Crawl yet. I just never got around to it. I have heard good things about it, and I know plenty of people who like it, and like Godzilla King of the Monsters at the same time, but I don't need to have seen Crawl in order to know that this is a bad take. You'll see why soon enough, because, wow. You know what? No more stalling. Let's just get to the article. Here's how it opens, and I should note, it was published on July 19th when Crawl was first out in theaters. Today marks the release of Crawl, the brutal, wet, seriously there's a lot of water involved, and wild alligator horror movie from Piranha 3D director Alexander Aja. And the most surprising thing about this schlocky B-movie, which stars Barry Pepper and Kea Scodelario as a father-daughter duo trying to escape their old home's flooding gator-infested crawl space during a hurricane, is that it's much better than it has any right to be. Okay, so just based on that, there isn't necessarily anything too objectionable. I mean, you could sort of look at the better than it has any right to be thing with a sideways glance, but, you know, maybe that's true. Crawl is billed as a schlocky B-movie, so maybe it really is better than it has any right to be. However, immediately next it says, in fact, Crawl is so good that we think it's better than this summer's other reptile monster movie, Godzilla King of the Monsters. Here are 4 reasons why. Strap in, folks. This is where it gets stupid. Number 1, it's self-aware. One of the most important things for any low-budget horror movie with a silly premise, like What If Jaws but with an alligator, wow, the grammar in that one, is to be conscious of its own silliness. Crawl is at least mildly, if not acutely, aware that it is silly and benefits from it. Because the movie knows what it is, audiences are more willing to suspend their disbelief. Otherwise, eye-roll-inducing lines like "I'm an apex predator all day" invoke laughter and cheers, and mediocre-looking CGI alligators are still a terrifying threat. King of the Monsters, on the other hand, fails to recognize that it's a big dumb movie about giant monsters fighting each other. With dozens of minutes of self-serious debate over whether or not to unleash the Titans, the movie is an unfocused slog. Alright. Barring the obvious retort of "in your opinion," which ultimately says nothing, I get the sense that you're going in with a kind of already decided sense that these movies are supposed to be self-aware. You have no space in your mind for anything of quality in the monster movie genre unless it's a super ironic postmodern take on it all that acknowledges that it's silly and not serious and not real art. And by the way, Crawl knowing what it is, but at the same time implying King of the Monsters doesn't? King of the Monsters knows exactly what it is as well. You could easily make the argument that King of the Monsters knows what it is just as much as that Crawl knows what it is. And why does it need to be self-aware in order to be good? I mean, self-awareness can work for certain things, but with other things, you have to abandon self-awareness and you have to take the material seriously. Richard Donner's Superman the movie, there is no self-awareness in that film at all. It is very grounded in the idea that it's going to take Superman 100% seriously. And this was done at a time when Superman was considered kind of hokey and blasé and not very popular. But by taking it seriously, it worked. Now, like I said, I haven't seen Crawl. I don't know how self-aware it is, and I don't know if that self-awareness works to its advantage or not. But I can say that this is not an accurate comparison. Just because one movie is self-aware and another isn't, that's not a measure of quality. That's just a measure of what makes them different. Maybe it appeals more to you personally, but to use it as an objective measure of quality is asinine. Number 2, oh, this'll be a good one. Critics love it. Case in point, Crawl is currently sitting at a very healthy 88% on Rotten Tomatoes, whereas King of the Monsters, which EW gave a C-, has stabilized at 41%. Gee, I can't imagine there's any bias going into this particular point. Rotten Tomatoes scores don't matter. I can save this for a whole different rant, but let me just give you a little taste right now. Rotten Tomatoes doesn't work because it tries to take subjective opinions of art and turn them into objective measures of quality. That's impossible. You cannot turn the subjective into the objective. Well, I mean, you can in a dictatorship government, but I don't think that's necessarily the kind of power Rotten Tomatoes has. So it's really not that important. It doesn't really signify anything. Plus, like I said, this article went up on Entertainment Weekly. Of course they're going to show a bit of favoritism when it comes to critic reviews. Sorry, but I don't think this means anything. You know what other movie got a terrible review when it first came out? The original Godzilla King of the Monsters from 1954, on both sides of the Pacific Ocean. And as we all know, that movie is still reviled today and definitely not considered a classic that's a gold standard for the genre and worthy of release by the Criterion Collection. Yep, the passage of time sure hasn't changed opinions on that movie at all. Aren't we all glad to know that opinions remain static no matter what? That's sarcasm, by the way. Number 3, there's an adorable dog. As with any great movie, Crawl has a dog. Sugar, Scodelario's trusty, scruffy, adorable pet companion, gets a fair share of screen time, and to the movie's credit, spoiler alert, the pooch lives to tell the tale. Crawl understands the sanctity of the lives of our furry friends, so much so that the movie's Twitter account posted a photo of Sugar with the caption, "Number 1 rule, always save the dog. Thank you, Crawl." Alas, King of the Monsters features exactly 0 dogs and tragically sacrifices Mothra, Queen of the Monsters. The latter even prompted a series of tweets with the hashtag #MothraInnocent. This is what makes me question how seriously to take this whole thing, because why is this a valid reason? Don't get me wrong, folks. I'm a dog person. I love dogs. I hate when movies kill the dogs, so I appreciate that Crawl apparently didn't do that. But just the virtue of having a dog as opposed to not having a dog is a ridiculous measure of quality. In that case, there are so many movies you can strike from the record of best movies ever made simply because they don't have dogs. Citizen Kane? No dog in that. I mean, there's a sled, but that's hardly the same thing, so it certainly doesn't deserve to have the title of best movie ever, except it was recently knocked down by Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, but that doesn't have a dog in it either, so no dog, no quality. Do you see the problem here? That you have a dog is great, but okay, just because Godzilla King of the Monsters doesn't have a dog, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean anything about the quality. And as far as Mothra dying, I mean, I've never seen that Mothra innocent hashtag in my life. Not that I was really looking for it, but I certainly never saw it. I didn't see it in any of the groups I was in, nowhere. So, not that I think he's making it up, but it clearly didn't gain that much traction. But also, Mothra dying is part of what Mothra does. And it was a good, tragic moment. It was well handled. Just because Mothra was a likable character and had to die, that somehow is a bad thing? Oh, God forbid this movie have any sort of drama or have the gall to kill a major character in order to raise the stakes. I mean, heaven forbid. But then again, like I said, this is so stupid as far as reasons go that I genuinely question how seriously I meant to take this. But I'm gonna take it seriously just for one more reason, because that's the only reason we have left. Number 4, it's short, simple, and suspenseful. Finally, Crawl boasts tight 87-minute runtime. Boasts a tight 87-minute runtime. please proofread. It gets in and gets out before overstaying its welcome, and clearly executes its premise by delivering teeth-grinding tension and gore without relying too heavily on cheap jump scares. King of the Monsters, however, is a bloated 132 minutes long and gets so bogged down in its convoluted plot that even the monster fights become a chore to sit through. Don't get us wrong, Godzilla is a far superior reptile monster than Krawl's alligator in terms of size, look, and pure grit. It just so happens that Krawl is a far superior movie. And with this, you've just made the perfect case as to why the orifice you're speaking from is not your mouth. Because you've basically stated there's no reason to compare these movies at all. As far as being short and simple, I mean, Avengers Endgame, that's my response. That movie was longer than either Krawl or King of the Monsters, and had a plot so convoluted that it literally makes no sense. And the filmmakers and various fans have had to do a lot of backtracking and damage control in order to try and explain how it does make sense, though it really still doesn't. But to say that being shorter and having a simpler plot is better than having a longer runtime with a more complex plot, again, that's only pointing out how these movies are different from each other. It's not a measure of which one is better than the other. Being different is not the same as being better or worse, like I've said 1,000 times before. And as far as being suspenseful, well, that's because Krawl is a horror movie. It's a grounded, suspenseful horror thriller. King of the Monsters is more accurately described as an action-packed sci-fi fantasy. Completely different realm. You can't compare them. The reason you're comparing them, in fact, is purely because they both feature reptile monsters in them, one of which isn't even technically a monster. Alligators are just animals. It's treated as the antagonist, sure, which makes it even more disparate from the Godzilla comparison, because Godzilla's the protagonist. But even so, the fact that you just have two movies with reptiles in them isn't grounds to justify the comparison. People were telling me occasionally, back when I compared Godzilla 2014 to Shin Godzilla, that the comparison wasn't a good one to make because they were vastly different genres. One was a political thriller, the other wasn't more of a natural disaster movie. I mean, never mind the fact that Shin Godzilla was also based on natural disasters as well. But even if we put that aside, you can still say that there's grounds to justify a comparison of those two films because they are both Godzilla movies, and they are both hard reboots of the Godzilla series that take the character in different directions. Comparing Godzilla to Krawl doesn't make sense, especially if the only reason you have is because they both feature reptiles in them. Hey, you know what? I've got a great idea. I'm gonna write an article all about why Harry and the Hendersons is a better movie than Star Wars: A New Hope. They both feature tall, hairy hominid characters. They're practically mirror images of each other. Except they're not. They're completely different realms. You may recall when I did my initial review of Godzilla King of the Monsters, I stated in response to the negative reviews which had surfaced prior to its release that the critics know nothing. Articles like this do not convince me otherwise. There is clearly such a bias going on here that people will come up with any reason to say King of the Monsters is bad, even when it makes no sense at all. Seriously, this article does not make any sense, to the point where, again, I'm not entirely sure how seriously I should take it. I've taken it seriously on the off chance that this guy is sincere and that people might actually believe him. But quite frankly, there's no reason to take this seriously, even if it was meant to be sincere. This article is a travesty, an absolute mess. Whoever you're going to listen to regarding Godzilla King of the Monsters, don't listen to stuff like this. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni viewer signing off. Good grief. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it as well as subscribe to the channel for more content of a similar nature. Also, check the description for links to our Twitter, DeviantArt, and Patreon pages, as well as the Amazon link for the novel Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, penned by yours truly. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.